Welcome back. I think given the time, we'll just jump right into it. Do you have any objections to that, Brandy? Yep, we'll jump right in with Tom Lockwood with HiSeasNet presenting updates on the HiSeasNet project.
Thanks, Lee. Thomas Lockwood with UC San Diego's HiSeasNet project that's supporting SatComms on the all the academic research fleet vessels. I'm sorry. Let me permanently unmute myself here. For those of you that haven't visited our website in the last year or two, it is something that we keep a lot of resources on. So it has information about all the ships we support, the equipment that's on them, all of the different plans that we have. Definitely a work in progress as far as additional functions and features that we're looking to add to the website all the time, but just want to make everyone aware that that resource is there. And then, you know, not that all the questions can be answered up there, but there definitely is a trove of information up there. Just for this presentation in general, kind of a list of the topics we're going to go over. I'll kind of go straight into personnel. Kevin Walsh, that many of you are familiar with from past RVTECs, used to be the primary on this project. He retired as of July 2021 and is off to new adventures. Definitely contributed greatly to this project over the years, and we wish him well in his next phase. I took over as primary on the project when Kevin retired. I've been working on the project for a little over 2 years, so won't claim it's hasn't been a loss without Kevin, but we're definitely moving forward. And other people still working on the project, Lee Elliott, John Meyer, Kenny Olson, and Mark Humphrey are also all still supporting this project fairly heavily. So state of the fleet. We have 2 different multi-system systems for SatComms that we have in the U.S. academic research fleet. Our primary system is SeaLink Plus. That's mostly on the larger ships, which is a combination of Marlink SeaLink service. And we also have Iridium domes on there as a backup for out-of-band management. Fleet Express is our secondary SatCom system that is available on all ships. And that's a combination of Global Express and Fleet Express. So 2 separate domes on the vessel that provide 2 different paths for data connectivity. Each system has a high performance. For SeaLink, that's going to be the larger domes. So here on this vessel, it's the one on top. The smaller dome to the side is the GX dome for Fleet Express. Bigger domes really do mean better performance. We can pretty much burst those larger domes up to, not that we'd ever want to pay for it, but 80 megs per second. And even for a comparison, it's cheaper to do an expansion on the larger domes compared to the smaller domes. So even though we can get some higher performance out of the smaller domes on the number of the ships, expansions on those domes do cost more just based on the amount of power that's required to push that. Pretty much for the large domes, we've got 3 models in the fleet. Most of the domes that we've been installing since 2020 are Intellian V240Ms. There's 2 different flavors of those domes. Most of the fleet has the Gen 1s installed. We have the Gen 2s installed on Sikuliak The major difference between those two generations, the Gen 2s are LEO capable with 2 domes, but that's the only ship we've done an install on so far that actually even had 2 domes to potentially look at leveraging that in the future. Most of the other vessels were running Cobham domes, either 7911s for the ones that are dual CKU, and those were deployed between 2015 and 2018. And then we've got a couple of vessels with KU only with Cobham 6000 series domes. Kind of as mentioned earlier, the 2.4 domes do have the biggest contract and do have the biggest capabilities as far as how much bandwidth we can push over those. For Global Express, there's 3 different models we have in fleet. The Cobham Sailor 100 GXs, those have kind of been the workhorse of the fleet. Most of those were all replaced in 2019. We still have some domes that are older than that in fleet, but pretty much 2019 and earlier on most of those domes. When UC San Diego took over the secondary satellite project, we started replacing domes. Most of those in 2020 were Intellian GX100 HPs. And then starting this year, we've done a newer version of that dome. The newer NX ones are LEO capable in the future. If there are 2 domes installed, we'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation, just as far as how we've been refreshing the fleet to potentially take advantage of that in the future. So kind of state of the fleet and HiSeasNet with COVID. It was definitely an interesting year. Saw the fleet fully come back to sailing after a number of COVID lockdowns. So we're kind of taking a lot of vessels off suspension, ramping those up. As those cruises started, we definitely started seeing more of a reliance on satellite communications and increased bandwidth requirements, not only to support remote learning, but also remote collaboration with parties that were supporting cruises off ship that weren't able to sail. Typically and historically, we've always asked for 90 days or more for preparing any expansions on link performance. Definitely something that was tested repeatedly as far as how quickly we could push expansions and move expansions due to changing schedules over the last year. But that still is kind of a good baseline. Is 90 days is kind of the minimum that we're asking for to go through with providers, look at where the ships are going to be sailing, what satellites are available to cover that, and ensure that we do have adequate capacity for the performance that you're looking for. As a project, we pretty much did the most number of expansions ever this last year, and a great deal of great amount of that was due to the increased reliance and extra bandwidth. A lot of what we were seeing was 4 megs ship to shore to ship, 2 megs ship to shore, which is kind of a minimum baseline required for Zoom and similar telepresence and remote learning applications. As this becomes more critical, we've had a few cruises where we've done it, but our recommendation is not only expanding one system, it's really primary and secondary, so that if we do have an issue, that you've got some additional capacity on the Fleet Express side too to support the cruise as this does become more mission critical. So by the numbers, this year wasn't any less as far as how many domes we actually installed. This was second only to 2020 for the most Ray domes that we've ever deployed in a year. Current count is 17. And then expansion requests, we've already done over 30 expansions, and that continues to grow. Not that we have much of the year left, but so as far as changes, last year in 2020, we had started migrating vessels off of the high performance HiSeasNet from our private ground station to Marlink's Sea-Link service, and we pretty much finished all those vessels this year. So we still have the ground station, but right now it's not serving anything in the fleet. All those are running off a commercial service. And on Fleet Express, Oceanus actually migrated off of HiSeasNet Classic and went for a dual dome setup on Fleet Express only. Rachel Carson is the last vessel we have in the fleet that still needs to be added to have a GX dome on Fleet Express. They're a little, they're looking at mast mods to support that dome. Being the smallest vessel in the fleet, it's definitely run into some challenges. As far as new installations, a lot of the focus has been on achieving full sky view. So I already mentioned Oceanus. Sekuliak also got dual NX domes. One of the nice thing on these newer GX NX domes is it is just one cable again. For a number of the GX100 domes, those were actually 2 comm cables and power independently. So getting back to it just being one cable's definitely made installations easier on vessels. For Ravel, we actually installed dual domes. Originally, when the ship was deployed, it was just one GX dome with the fleet broadband off to the other side. That was relocated down to fleet broadband was relocated to the top of the bridge, and we're top of mast both for the C KU dome and for the 2 GX domes. Atlantis is a similar setup, but their GX domes are actually down off of either flying bridge. Thompson was actually just completed last week. They've got one down on the flying bridge, second one's on the backside off of the chart room. So port and starboard, kind of a little more forward and aft of the main mast for that vessel. We've also been taking a number of old Sailor 100 domes. We're currently in the middle of an install on Sproul, testing dual GX 100 domes on a smaller vessel. So kind of a nice little install for the second dome on top of our lab van. And that'll be going live in November, but just mounted that one last week. And then Sally Ride, the dome was originally was kind of behind our one of the larger C-band domes. So we did a mast mod in shipyard on Sally Ride and kind of going off of some of the earlier work done on Neil Armstrong, and relocated that dome top of mast for better sky views. Let's see. And then on the C-band side, for the larger 2.4 meter domes, Sekuliak got dual domes installed in May, and those are the only Gen 2 domes that we have in the fleet. As noted earlier, that was the first vessel that we did that actually had two 2.4 meter domes on it. So based on LEO futures and a lot of the work profile of the Kuliak, we did go with the more expensive Generation 2 domes on that vessel. Atlantis also got their new dome installed coming out of shipyard, top of mast. Number of the challenges this year, kind of already talked about the need for increased reliability and bandwidth. You know, COVID-19 also increased a lot of the challenges around logistics for shipping those domes. Most of these domes are actually coming from Korea. So as much as we're asking for 90-day for expansions, it's kind of the same thing when we're ordering domes. It usually takes at least 2 to 3 months to get a dome ordered, manufactured in Korea, and shipped to its final destination. Some other challenges that we've had, Marlink for the primary C-Link Plus system. For most of the vessels, as they've come into the NewTek network, there were a few that were originally deployed on iDirect, but most came in on NewTek or have been migrated. They've all been migrated to NewTek at this point. The NewTek platform is great. It actually allows for those larger expansions up to 80 megs, but being earlier adopters hasn't been without its challenges. So for Marlink, as they're cutting over their older iDirect network to NewTek, they are somewhat limited on how many satellites they have to provide service on each platform. Some of the earliest iterations of this, for Thompson, a lot of work around their work on the East Pacific rise. It's kind of a area of the Eastern Pacific that doesn't see a lot of traffic. Honestly, when we originally told Marlink the vessel was going to that location, a lot of the assumptions made on Marlink's side was more we'd be cruising through, not parking in that general area for multiple weeks doing surveys. So definitely lessons learned as far as it is kind of a area where we're transitioning between footprints from the Pacific Ocean and Atlantic coverage. So originally the expansion that we had for Thompson was actually done on the Pacific side and on the Pacific satellite, and they really had to be on the Atlantic satellite based on where the vessel was operating. When we originally did our first expansion on Ravel, ran into a number of issues with, we were getting full bandwidth, but we were seeing a high amount of drop packets. So as we did different expansions over the period from Ravel, Atlantis, and a few others, we'd actually been working with Marlink on diagnosing some of that poor performance. But Thompson also saw that really come to a head where video streaming on their JSON cruise was operating poorly. Good news on that one, we'd kind of been working the issue long enough with Marlink that it was acknowledged we'd had enough troubleshooting and done that we were able to narrow it down and get it fixed within a week or two of that month-long cruise, but it still was a pretty bad impact for that cruise. Kuliak, they've also run into issues at high latitude due to that NewTek cutover. Marlink had planned on cutting over every vessel in earlier 2021, but a number of the fishing fleets went out to sea, and Marlink hasn't been able to get them back. So there is a bit of limited options until Marlink gets the rest of the Arctic fishing fleets cut over. And there's been severe performance problems with the alternate options that Marlink has had. So Kuliak, ironically, as much as they've traditionally relied heavily on C-Link at high latitude, and FX wasn't as reliable. We've kind of seen the opposite this year, where FX has been performing and C-Link has been the poor limited performer. That is expected to improve as more satellites are brought over, but definitely something we're working with Marlink on and continuing to dog, even the satellites that we've used historically for supporting Sikuliak at high latitude isn't something currently in Marlink's portfolio. So we're looking at remedying that as best we can. Needless to say, new tech on Marlink is growing. So as we work through these problems, they'll repeat less, but we're definitely paying a lot of the pain in this first year, kind of learning where the trouble spots are and addressing those with Marlink, both from a capacity and what they can provide standpoint, and them getting to know kind of how our fleet operates. On the other side, some of the advantages of working with a larger provider. Telluride has had hardware issues on their 2.4 meter domes pretty continuously through the past number of months, and we've narrowed those down a lot and are coming to a resolution, but it's definitely something where we've had to work those fairly hard, and Marlink has brought a lot of resources to bear to support that. And similarly on Ravel, even though that was a fairly new dome, we did run into a cruise where we did have a hardware failure on that, and as Lee will attest, that's pretty much the first cruise he's ever been on where the science party said, we don't have internet, we can't cruise, we can't do this cruise. So the ship actually returned to port. We had a field attendance while the vessel was in port, repaired the problem, and the ship went back out and continued the science mission. On the Fleet Express side, Oceanus definitely had some issues, some growing pains with that dual dome installation. They had some issues with failover on their dual GX domes, and it actually failing back at points where it went to fleet broadband only. Ravel initially, based on how we did that installation, had very poor GX coverage before the dual dome installation. Sproul was kind of interesting. For being a single dome, we actually were getting 90% uptime, but whenever they were doing surveys, when they changed direction, there was drops in connectivity as they went into in and out of blind spots, and we definitely had feedback on those cruises as well as far as it being an operational issue. Our future plans at a glance, we are looking at bandwidth upgrades. So those have been approved and are in next year's budget. There's a few vessels that we're looking at doing this calendar year as well for November, December timeframe. But right now it's on the FX side, we're looking at increasing all plans to 2x2, which is kind of the magic plan level where we still can do suspensions. And then on C-Link, we're looking at upgrading those to 4x2. We are going to continue projects for swapping out aging hardware. This next year, we're really pursuing class-specific solutions. So we're looking at Sally Ride and Neil Armstrong. And those are going to be a little more complex just based on how tight the footprint is on those vessels. So that's the plan for next year as far as the larger domes are concerned. And we are, in discussions with Marlink about potential for at-sea LEO testing at some point in 2022. Stay tuned. We'll let you guys know as soon as we have some additional information on that. We are additionally looking at potential addition of some cellular WAN support. And then there is some specialized use of Iridium that we can do for backup data for a number of different options that we're investigating as well. And that is everything I have. I'm not sure how tight I'm on the schedule right now, but any questions are definitely welcomed.
Toby has a question.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Has anyone looked at how Starlink is performing?
Nothing I can talk about at this point. Anything would be NDA, but there are a couple of vessels looking at it.
What I can say about Starlink is they currently don't have any teleports that would work for anything at sea. So all their teleports are terrestrial. So until they actually do the linking part of Starlink, where they're doing bird-to-bird comms, it won't be available for ocean ships. I mean,
yeah, that's kind of the same thing we've gotten on the LEO side as well. It's currently for their plans. A lot of it is land-based. It really is mid to later in 2022 that we're starting to look at there being something in the plans where we're looking at ocean areas starting to have potential.
I should probably introduce myself. I'm Kenneth Olson, one of the members of HiSeasNet. Probably talked to all of you at some point. And so when we're talking about LEO, initially, it's more of a replacement for cellular than an ocean-going technology until some of these companies are doing satellite-to-satellite linking because they are smaller footprints. And so they still need something to collect that data in a footprint or like a cellular tower. And they just don't have them in the middle of the ocean, obviously. So LEO will be, so like if we had Starlink today, you'd pull into port and that would have a terrestrial link that it could talk to and, be better performance than a cellular link. But they're not going to, not in the next couple of years are we going to be seeing LEO as an ocean-going technology, as far as I've seen.
Don, could you have a question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Pre-pandemic, they used to have service maintenance calls come out on a basis. Is there any talk of restarting that up? Carl Capuzzo used to come out down south here. I was just wondering, any plans on that?
Yeah, so we definitely need to circle in with you guys and do a check-in. We've been doing, they haven't been as regular as we'd like, but we have been checking in with individual universities. And then, yes, for your vessel specifically, we need to coordinate an annual maintenance visit.
With that, we should keep moving on. We can do more questions in the community section on the app. Right, then I think now we'll turn it over to I don't have the list in front of us. Ken Feldman's going to present for SatNAG.
All right. Hi, everybody. Tom, if you could stop sharing, I will start.
Go ahead and try to start. I think my share stopped.
There we go. Just stop. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Do that and do that and do this guy. All right. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
All right, great. Perfect. Well, hi, everybody. I'm Ken Feldman from University of Washington. Here to give a little update on what we've been doing in the Satellite Network Advisory Group, SatNAG. So we are comprised of 4 people: Laura Stulp from Woods Hole, myself, Eric Grubel from URI, and John Haverlack from University of Alaska Fairbanks. And we were started by Jim to explore ways to make the ship-to-shore communication experience more uniform across the fleet. That's where we started originally, and our mission is to steward the objective, effective, and efficient use of ship-to-shore network resources. Really looking for what we can do to make life better for everybody involved is the bottom line. So we work, one of the main things is we work in good faith to look at things that are best for the fleet as a whole, not look at those over what might be our personal interests or what might be better for our individual institutions. And all recommendations that we are presenting to the community, we are piloting at our home institutions first. So we won't recommend something unless we've tried it ourselves first. Last year in review, the Cyber Infrastructure Working Group, there's going to be a talk on that in the next section, so I won't go into a whole lot of detail on that. But this year, the IMO, International Maritime Organization, has a set of cybersecurity requirements that have been enforced starting this year. And as part of that, we've been looking at what do we do as a fleet. Most of that has been happening in the CIWG, but all the members of SatNAG have been an active part of that. Just a little bit of preamble, we've been working with an outside organization, Peregrine. Many of you may be familiar, may have interacted with them, to get an assessment of where we are with each vessel. And as part of that, they've deployed a CyberX device. I'll get into more on that in a minute. But just wanted to mention that much for now. We've also been continuing our efforts on a next generation firewall. So we have the cyberomes in place on a number of vessels. They've been very useful for having captive portals to limit bandwidth usage by individuals. And CyberRome was end of life, I believe, in April of this year. And so we've been transitioning to Sophos XG, which is well, it was billed as a plug-in replacement. It hasn't quite been as simple as that, but has been relatively straightforward. We currently are running Sophos XGs on the Oceanus, the Armstrong, Thompson, and Atlantis, and we have a number of tips and tricks if anybody is interested in moving to that and getting that going. We are also, we're gearing up. Again, this is part of more of this in the Cyber Infrastructure Working Group talk, but we are engaging the Research SOC as an external entity to help us with our cyber infrastructure plans moving forward. And SatNAG will be collaborating with them, and what they're doing and what they are recommending that we set up will influence where we go with a longer term next generation solution for firewall for the vessels. One of the things that is important to us is to try and have it be uniform across the vessels to the extent possible. It makes life easier for everybody, and makes it a uniform experience for users as they come on to different vessels. We've also been updating our internet use policy. We've raised the daily quota to 400 megabytes per day. And when those new expansions come in, we'll reevaluate and probably raise that again. We've also got a lot of information on our wiki. A lot of information has been added to our wiki. A little more on that. If you haven't looked, please go visit satnag.unols.org. We've got a whole lot of information about the various cybersecurity regulations that are coming on. We've got information on a lot of the satellite equipment that Tom was just talking about. We've also got a lot of tips and tricks on what people can do to limit their bandwidth usage on their individual devices. A lot of tips on getting the Sophos XGs going. And shout out to Rebecca Hudek for doing a lot of that work. So anyway, there's a lot of information on there. Our full internet use policy is also on there, and we are continually improving. If you have suggestions for things to add, please let us know. We're always looking to make it better and more useful as much as possible. Our goals for the next year is to continue deploying the Sophos XG firewalls and work on rebuilding the traffic usage metrics. So the more we had for a while under the cyber roams, we were collecting usage information from a number of vessels, and that was really key and helpful in figuring out what are people doing, what is the activity, how are things being used, and help guide where we can go to help improve things. So get those back in step, and that will help us as we continue to move forward, especially as the bandwidth continues to grow, and we'll see how usage is changing in that regard. We are also have been providing technical oversight for HiSeasNet as they've been deploying these multiple systems across the fleet. And we've also are setting up to provide technical oversight for the research SOC group with cybersecurity as they are coming online and getting started with the research fleet. We're also going to continue with our next generation firewall, and one of the things we really like to be going further on is creating a network reference architecture. The more we can get things in common across the vessels, the easier it'll be to improve experience for everybody. The more people can get help from a wider audience if there are issues on a particular vessel, because there's more things that are similar. And it will also allow us easier adoption of new technologies as they come along. It'll be easier to implement across the fleet once they're developed on a few vessels. So it'll help us going forward in a lot of different ways. And it's not a simple prospect. Right now we have every vessel operated by different institutions, and they've been set up in the past largely standalone. So it's an effort and a slow process to do that, but important, and we'll gain a whole lot by doing that. We're also continuing to add to the website, as mentioned before, and would love feedback on anything that would be useful that you'd find interesting and helpful to put in there. So I mentioned earlier about the cyber infrastructure and the Peregrine group that has been working with the fleet. As part of that, every vessel has a CyberX device. During the initial, the original promise was that this was a passive monitoring device for all our networks and would give us the ability to flag unusual activity, report on new and changed devices over time, and simplify the annual reporting process. Peregrine, when they were starting out, were working with CyberX and had an understanding that CyberX personnel would help the fleet get those going. Before we got things implemented, CyberX was acquired by Microsoft, and the mission and focus of that product changed. They have been a lot less responsive to our needs. And as the devices are configured we've had a number of questions about the devices from various people, but as the devices are currently configured, the disk fills up in just a couple of days, and it basically becomes bricked. So right now they're not worth setting up as is. They're just not really worthwhile. However, it's really could very potentially be useful that we have a device that's in common on with every vessel on the fleet. So as we work with Research SOC, the hope is that we can put these devices to good use in creating uniform monitoring or some other uniform activity that will be helpful for gathering metrics from the whole fleet. Remains to be seen, so we'll stay tuned on what that looks like. But for now, we have them. So bottom line, best to keep it in the box for now. Not worth the time yet, but hopefully we'll have a useful purpose for them soon. We really would like to hear more about issues that vessels are facing in this domain: network, cybersecurity, SatComm. And we really especially would like to hear from smaller vessels. We spend a lot of time in our deliberations on things that are happening in the larger vessels. They tend to be complex and have a lot of intricacies in what's going on there. But we're also very mindful that there are fewer resources available for smaller vessels, and we really are trying to come up with things that work across the fleet as much as possible, and to simplify things as much as possible so that it's easier for everybody, especially for the techs that are on board, as all this new technology comes on and there's more and more complex things that are happening that everybody has to keep track of all the time. The more we can make things simplified, the better. So we'd really like to hear what's going on and where things are today. With that, we'd like to know how would everybody feel about a revised networking survey, so that we get a sense of where things are today. Would everybody be open to that? It's kind of an open question. Feel free to email us at satnag.unils.org with anything along those lines. And so that was a relatively brief overview. And with that, would really love to open it up to questions and discussions for what people are seeing and where things are. Does anybody have any questions?
Hey, Ken, this is Toby.
Hi, Toby.
One of the things that we've been kicking around in the UHDAS group for a very long time, and it's just a kick around point of thought at the moment, but that is we need access to the ships, and that happens at the moment on a ship-by-ship basis.
Right.
Some ships just give us straight access in, and some of them we go through multiple hops and all of that sort of interesting thing. So the thought has been kicking around that we might set up an internal VPN here in Hawaii, that we could trigger the ship side UHDAS server to connect to. But that's going to require having all of the proper settings in the firewalls and gateways and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
Toward a more consistent way of doing that, especially as the more and more of the ships get the same sorts of equipment, just bear in mind and provide any feedback you might have possible.
Well, I think I'll say this is one of the goals of having a reference network architecture, is that we can hopefully, oh, somebody just asked me if I'd stop sharing my screen, so I will do that real quick. There we go. So everybody can see everybody a little better. Thanks for that. So one of the things we've been looking at is how do we make things more uniform across the board, and what can we do that that sets things up so that we can have a straightforward way to do that. Now, part of that is going to depend on cybersecurity considerations, and so we want to look at and see what Research SOC is going to be recommending and what they have to say before we go too far down the road. But absolutely, I hear you, and that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, it has been an interesting problem, right? Every ship is a little different. Even, I mean, in an ideal world, if we could have the same IP space, right? We could pre-configure everything. I don't know that that's ever going to happen, but to the extent that we can make things look similar and that we have a similar, even if it's just the firewalls and the way out of the ship, this process all looks the same and it all works the same, then we can follow the same process everywhere and make things easier. It's not going to happen overnight. Yeah, definitely keeping that in mind for sure. And you all have done a great job in what you're doing in creating those tunnels from the ADCP machines. And it'll be interesting to see what Research SOC has to say about that.
I just before you leave that topic too quick, I think that UHDAS probably has the best insight as to what the network infrastructure across the fleet looks like. And so it'd probably be real important to, I see Jules has unmuted herself to respond, but tap into that knowledge.
We have a specific view. That doesn't mean that we have the best knowledge. The network architecture on each of the ships, we only know about the little part that we interact with.
Sure.
But for that little part that you interact with, you have the most complete picture, I think, of probably anybody else.
Well, what you do have is you have a good understanding of what it takes to get off the vessel from on the vessel.
All I can say is it's different for every
absolutely.
institution.
Oh yeah, absolutely true. Yeah, so it's an interesting it's an interesting set of problems, and different institutions themselves have a different level of involvement in each vessel, which some are a lot more autonomous, some have a lot more functionality that's dictated by the larger university, and that is an added complication to trying to make things more uniform. But we should continue to try, because there are a lot of advantages in doing that. Going back to our initial mission, one of our goals is to try and have a uniform experience for participants as they go from vessel to vessel. So if a scientist knows that they're going to see on an ARF vessel, they have a good idea of what to expect in this realm, and all of these things will contribute to that. Lee, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I have one. Yeah, one item was the other thing that another topic that concerns me sometimes when we get like the winch pools reporting that they want to put these VPN devices on all the winches, and so I know a number of times we've had those things just show up on the ship. We try to bring it up at the pre-cruise meeting, but regardless, they show up on the ship, and oh yeah, I want off-ship, unfettered off-ship access. Oh, sure. Do you? And so
right.
So those things we really don't have we don't have the resources to support that at the scale that's being desired. I mean, we're trying to get there, but that's I don't know how much of a pinch point those type of devices have been But we see it more and more, not just with winches, but with science systems. Oh, I want to put this device, hook it up to the underway system, and we're going to access it remotely.
Right.
And so the bandwidth, I think, can support a lot of that, but it's the that unfettered access part that is a concern.
Yeah, I agree. It is, and it is becoming more and more. Well, it's a security concern and it's a bandwidth concern, both. And we have a lot of people that are doing more and more work that's in the cloud, for example, that's requiring, there was the mention of that one cruise on Ravel that had to go back because SatComms were down. I expect these are only going to become more and more common as we go. And they're going to change faster than we can do something about it.
Yep. Another question from Webb, and then we need to wrap it up so we can have a little break before the next session. But go ahead, Webb.
Sure, thank you. Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Yep.
Okay. With regards to the VPN access, and I don't know how kosher this really is, but a solution that I've been using to support OpenVDM and OpenRVDAS on UNOL's vessels is a software-based cloud server where the tech has to turn it on and turn it off. So that way the ship actually retains control, but when they need assistance, they can turn it on.
Sure.
And it's required zero interaction from the IT staff. So it's like I said, I don't know if that's the most correct way to do this in an IT security world, but that has gotten me to the ship when the techs needed me and made sure that I was not on the ships when the techs did not.
And that's great. That's an awesome thing. And I think that, that's a really good thought. And I think there are certainly some use cases where that is a great way to go. And yours is one. There's a lot of things like on the Thompson, for example, the engines are networked, and so is the wastewater treatment plant. And there could potentially be a time when external people want to get in and look at something, and that hasn't happened to date, but there are lots and lots of things, and and all the winches are now being networked. So it's a complex problem, and but one of the issues too is with the VPNs. Webb, the VPN you're talking about is really great for you to get to the application that you're supporting, and same with the ADCP equipment, right? A solution that works for that is great, but those don't necessarily have to be the same, and the same solution won't necessarily work for all. The more we can make it that way, the better.
The other thing I will add is the non-UNOL ships that I work with do leverage VPN systems that are in some cases AD authenticated, where basically so I know some of them are here with us, and maybe that's a resource, that's a somebody worth talking to on at least their experience, both in terms of how effective it is, as well as how much effort it takes to maintain.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Well, I will, at least for SatNAG, we are all absolutely interested.
I think we should go ahead and end things here. So we have a short break before the next session. Sound good, Brandy? Sound good? Yep.
All right.
Sure does. SatComms round 2.
SatComms round 2. So yes, so we are absolutely interested in continuing conversation. More dialogue is better. Our email is there, and there's the chat for this session. Thanks, everybody.